Hi, Ceren. How are you?
Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. I just turned on my microphone. It took me like 2 minutes.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you.
So, are we starting in about 5 minutes or
Yeah,
so?
yeah. We still have 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah, I'm here. I just need to run down and grab
Oh, yeah.
something,
Don't
and
worry.
I'll be back in a
Yep.
sec. Yeah. All right. Yep. Speak soon. Okay, I'm here.
Hey, sorry. I had to navigate back to the.
No, no, it's okay. And thanks for sending me the other talk. It's I need to keep an eye on these things. It's really good.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you.
And so can record it and then have it available after.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So usually I send a link to the recording.
Uh-huh.
And if you want to also have the raw audio file, let me know. Then I'll send it to you too.
I mean, it's okay. But yeah, no, it's good to have a at least for things you cannot catch up live. It's good to be able to listen.
Yeah, so we have also a Spotify and YouTube account where I upload things for people that don't
Ah,
have like um
amazing.
yeah, and then also it started kind of what like young scientists they like a few asked me, "Oh, do you embed the DOI? Does it do anything to the altmetric score?"
I see.
So I
Okay.
started embedding the
Uh-huh. Well, that's very good of you.
yeah, so I don't edit it.
Mm-hmm.
However, last time, I think I will edit the room from the other day because we
Okay.
opened it up very early to figure out like videos and stuff in the
Oh, I see.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that will be a kind of boring. But hi, Victoria. Meet Sarah. Am I saying your name right? Please say your
It's
name.
it's Jaren. It's the
Oh,
season.
Jared.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
good morning, Katarina. Good morning, Jaren. Welcome to.
Hi. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. Happy to be here and excited to hear what you have to share.
Hopefully, it'll live up to your expectations. It's gonna be very informal. Sorry.
Oh, please don't apologize for being here, giving us this gift of your time and everything you're
No, no,
about to
it's not a
share.
problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're
No,
so
I
happy.
just yeah. It's gonna be a bit informal.
We
So
love informal. We're here to
okay.
share what you have to share with as many people who want to come and listen. So,
Yeah, and I just figured I can get some questions from you guys, and then we can have it as almost like a big group discussion. So I'm very happy to have questions as I talk or afterwards, whatever suits you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. And again, thank you for doing this, like making the
No, please.
account and on the weekend.
No, no, it's okay. I mean, Saturdays are pretty chill, so I had a nice long walk on the beach, and it's for evening for me, so it feels like nice way to close the day off.
Oh, nice. That sounds wonderful. I walked in the park here
Yeah.
in the city, and went to the farmers market. That's what I.
Nice.
So yeah. Oh yeah, I think we can slowly start. I know
Okay.
people will keep coming in,
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
we'll start with introductions and so
Yeah,
on
yeah.
first and questions, so people won't miss too much, I think, from the presentation.
Sure.
Okay, so welcome everyone to Science Society, and of course, a special welcome to you, Ceren.
Thank you.
We are so glad you're here, and let me give a short introduction so people get to know you a little bit. Ceren is an archaeologist and specializes in the study of carbonized plant macro remains, which means woods, charcoal, seeds, tubers, and so on. And she is especially interested in working on the range of hunter-gatherer and early farming sites in Southwest Asia and Eastern Mediterranean. And her work focuses on exploring the complex two-way relationship between people, climate, and the environment, and how these are manifested in the plant use practices of prehistoric societies. She grew up in Turkey and she studied in the US, Canada, and the UK. And she has been working in Liverpool since she finished her PhD in 2015. And now she's actually getting ready to move to Portugal in the new year. Wow, wonderful. I'm from Portugal. Where
Oh,
in Portugal are
nice.
you?
So I'm going to Faro, Algarve.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And Victoria, she's Portuguese now too. I hope that
Oh,
was okay, Victoria, to share that. So
It's great.
yeah. Well,
she's
come and
part of
visit,
the
you know?
family.
Okay. Careful, careful, Karen. No,
No,
Sharon.
it's okay.
Sharon.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Um,
The
Jaren,
pronunciation?
it's like a J. But well,
Jaren.
come and
Okay,
visit.
Jaren.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay. Yeah, careful. We may actually come.
It's fine.
Yes.
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I am looking at 6 months of field work from starting in May, I think. So I'm not going to be there in any of the good months. So
But winter in the Algarve is good. A lot of people from the
probably,
UK
yeah.
spend their winter months in
That's
Algarve.
what I heard. Yeah.
And spring is very
So
pretty. Like it's actually green. Like the rest of
I
the year,
know.
it's
Yeah.
pretty dry, so it's not really green anymore.
Oh no, I'm really
And
looking
then you have
forward to it.
the
Yeah.
orange season. Please eat the fresh oranges from the
I
farms. Just go to a
know.
local farm, like a tiny one, when you drive through
Uh-huh.
to the interior, and go and pick oranges, like or buy
Yes.
oranges. They are so good. You never tasted oranges. Well, you grew up in Turkey, maybe you did.
Well, we did.
Sorry.
So my gran had orange trees in her garden, so I'm and tangerines. So I am missing those, and I'm looking forward to the possibility of being able to pick tangerines or oranges myself in the next 6 years.
Wonderful.
Anyway,
Oh, so you're going to stay
yeah.
6 years? Oh my God.
Well, it's a I know. So it's a 6 year postdoc,
Oh wow.
and there is the possibility of tenure, but we see, we
Oh,
see.
that's so
These things
wonderful.
are,
Well,
yeah.
we
No,
definitely
it
come
feels
and
like,
visit.
yeah, there's a lot of time. So come.
That's so great. Well, I'm so happy.
No,
Um,
no, I'm super excited. It's been a few years of rejections, applications, and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's exciting, and Portugal no less. So yeah.
yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. And I'll have the people usually are quite nice, so you know,
All right.
you'll
Yeah.
have to
No,
come.
I imagine it's gonna be good. It's a sort of,
And around
yeah.
Faro is a lot of international people too.
That's what I was told, and
Yeah.
the landscape looks really pretty. There's fish markets everywhere, so I'm sold.
And
You
the
know.
smell, there's a very specific smell in the Algarve right when you land with the plane. I guess you land in Faro?
Yeah, it's a
It's
Faro
it's right.
airport.
Well, in the winter, I don't know, but you know the different tiny plants that grow around. They
Ah,
have
like
a very
yeah,
specific smell in that region.
nice.
So right
So it
when you
must be a
land,
nice
you smell
mucky.
it. Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway.
That's nice.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll hand over the mic to Victoria to do the interview. Thank you for the
All right,
chance.
yeah.
Thank you, Katarina. And yeah, this is really exciting, and we have a lot of people here to hear you. Such a diverse um, group of audience as well. We have a baker and science friends, and just really happy to welcome you. And you reminded me, I'm originally from California, and I'm in Oregon right now, so I'm still almost from California, from LA. And what you mentioned about the oranges and the lemons, there is nothing like that, like getting it from your own tree. My grandma
I
also had
know.
orange and lemon trees and tangerine and kumquat and yeah. So
Yum.
yeah, moving along back into the room. Um, so somewhere along our lives, we develop our affinities and interests, and it would be interesting to hear about when you felt drawn toward an interest in science. If you can do maybe a quick
Um,
memory scan back in your life.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, I think it's for me. It started when I was very little. I just they would ask me, I guess, towards the end of primary school. In Turkey, things are very sort of directed. You have to take exams at the end of primary school, exams at the end of middle school, and exams at the end of high school. So I remember being asked in primary school what I wanted to do, and I basically kept saying I want to be a scientist. And they'd say, but which field? And I said, well, I want to be a scientist. I don't really care. I want to find something to investigate, and I want to spend the rest of my life thinking about weird things. um, and they weren't really terribly happy with my answer, I think, because I was a straight A student, but I just didn't really see the point of taking exams. So for me, it was always a way to engage my creativity. Science was a way to think about the world in different ways. So I guess I could have gone into different fields, but I ended up in archaeology as a sort of through the back door almost. I took some anthropology elective courses when I was doing my undergrad, and I got really interested in ethnomedicine and ethnobotany. Um, and then I thought, well, can I actually look at some prehistoric stuff? I'd always been interested in hunter gatherers and this period of transition to early farming. So yeah, it was. I don't know if that answers your question, but I just always wanted to do science, I guess.
Absolutely, it answers my question and what I was curious about, and it's specific to you and your answer, and I'm curious if growing up in Turkey or where you grew up, there was the history around you that may have motivated or inspired you to focus on what you had mentioned about ethnobotany and anthropology at all.
I think to some extent. So I grew up being completely clueless about archaeology. Um, I was not really well versed in it. I didn't even I do not have an interest in ruins or ancient sites, to be perfectly honest with you. Um, but I always was interested in wild plants. I guess because my mother and my grandmother were really into it. So and food was a big part of my growing up. So I guess I read about today about recipe books and food history, etc. So maybe food was what got me more interested in the archaeological and anthropological stuff.
Right, that's what I was wondering if the foods that you grew up around and maybe familial interest in food and things that you were exposed to had guided that at all. And and it does sound that way.
Yeah, I think it's mainly food. I mean, I call my brother now, and we talk about food. It's yeah, we try to talk about other stuff happening in the world, and then the conversation inevitably circle back to food and what we're gonna cook or what we're gonna eat, or yeah.
Well, if you listen to any of the replays from these rooms, you'll notice that we also spend a lot of time
We're just into food, yeah.
discussing. Yes, what's more fun? So, thank you, Ceren, and then also how wonderful that you were able to feel strong in your interest and you knew where you wanted to take yourself. I think that's always noteworthy because we can get swayed by outside influences and external pressures to not listen to a voice that we know is there. So hooray for you. That's a beautiful thing to hear.
Thank
It's a
you.
great
I
it's a
mean,
great
yeah,
example.
there's other ways to describe it, but I guess, it's one way to see it is the positive. The other way is just to see, well, you're stubborn as a goat. So I'll take that. I'll take the
That's
nice way of
Yeah,
putting
no,
it.
no, I think both ways are good because it's, language matters, the words we use,
Mhm.
and you could say that somebody was stubborn and you could also say that they were determined. So
Yeah.
often girls are, we get the other word, like bossy instead of assertive, right? So
Yeah,
absolutely, you have to choose the positive because life's hard enough. And so
for
it's,
sure. Yeah.
and also I think it speaks to how important it is to listen to children because you have that internal wisdom and
Hmm.
so at this point, I would like to just hand you the mic and invite
Okay.
you to go, excuse me, go into your discussion. And I know that you had also been very welcoming and mentioned that you were wanting to have it become an informal discussion. So at any point, we're here to
Hmm.
moderate that and, let you know if there are questions in the chat or bring friends up who may want to ask questions. So thank
All
you,
right.
Jaren, and the mic is yours.
Thank you. So, it's do I have to have my chat open anywhere, or will I just see something
No,
ping on the screen?
oh, go ahead, Katarina. Did you want to answer?
Oh, yeah, no, no, you don't have to. So
Okay.
everyone accesses the file by themselves, and we'll
Okay.
monitor the chat for you, so
Okay.
don't worry
Cool.
about it.
Wow, you guys are great. Thank you. Okay, so I guess everybody has a copy of the PDF, and I did put numbers inside a rubber ducky just to help things along. And I'm still on my introduction slide at the minute. Um, so thank you so much for inviting me and for the lovely introductions and quite insightful questions, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't expecting to be dissected quite before I start talking. So it was a nice change. So today I want to take this opportunity to give you a sort of informal talk and some of the background story, but some of the insights on my on the recent article that was published, starting with cooking in caves, which was a title that was actually modified from my original submission by the lovely people in antiquity who had better insight and said, well, actually you want to say what you're doing in your title. So and I'll also touch a little bit on plant use in the later Paleolithic in the regions I work on, which, as Katarina said earlier, um, focuses on Southwest Asia and Eastern Mediterranean and a bunch of sites that are earlier hunter-gatherer sites, but also slightly later and towards the advent and initial stages of farming. So on page 2, I give you a very brief introduction on the kinds of plant remains that I study. These are carbonised plant remains, and they're often preserved as a result of contact with hot heat. This can be slightly indirect heat as well, but we tend to get just exposure to fire and incomplete combustion. So generally, that they need to stay in temperature ranges below 500 Celsius or thereabouts. And you can get anywhere between 180 to 200 Celsius that is exposed for a while and just preserved. Um, so we don't get all the plants that are used at a site, and they tend to degrade and decay. We just get a snapshot and a residue of what remains. which is important to remember, I guess, for any kind of evaluation of archaeological plant remains. And in page 3, I show you some of the ways in which they can tend to be preserved at sites. So they can be found in sediments that are direct use areas like hearths or stoves or that sort of fire feature. Um, or they can also be part of general deposits that are thrown into middens. So midden is, I guess, an archaeological way and a fancy way of saying these are just areas of rubbish. And we get a lot of our plant remains from such deposits because people use fires and cooking and that sort of thing almost on a daily basis, and more often in many cases. And then they clean up and they throw things into a designated area. And this happens even in cave sites. It happens in large complex occupations that will have rubbish accumulated by multiple families or groups being thrown into the same area. And it's a practice that has very deep history. So anyway, we get plant remains from such contexts. On page 4, I give you a sort of very graphical demonstration of how we retrieve these plant remains from general soils that we excavate in archaeological sites, which is that we use the fantastic power of water to separate the plant remains that have lower density, so that they float to the top as the soil dissolves, and then we keep the water flowing and just catch them in a mesh. And then they get dried and they get sent to me in the lab. And then I never know what exactly I'm going to find until I start looking at things. So I hope that was a decent introduction into the materials that I study and some of the materials that are reported in the article. On page 5, I just give you I notice now, a map with very small letters, and I apologize, showing some of the regions that I work on. And I guess the term Fertile Crescent might be familiar to people who may have read about origins of agriculture. But this is my neck of the woods. I study things from the northern Zagros, from southeast and eastern Anatolia. I've done some work on the Levant in the past, and in central Anatolia and the west, and also from the eastern Mediterranean, specifically the Aegean Basin. So it's a broad region that has evidence of a lot of hunter-gatherer sites, but also is the area where we've had a lot of research done in origins of plant and animal domestication, as well as evidence for the earliest farming sites that we see, some of them with fantastic monumental architecture and so on. So hopefully it orients you a little bit. Okay, so going into the stuff I report on the paper, and I think I forgot to add the Franchthi Cave, so I apologize. So Shanidar Cave, on page 6, is now being re-excavated since 2015-16. It was an old excavation done by Ralph Solecki back in the day, which is a similar story with the materials that we studied from Franchthi Cave, which is in the Aegean. It was a result of excavations that was done in the 60s and 70s. So there is some legacy data here and legacy materials that had not been fully studied, and then sites being revisited, which for me was quite exciting because I could go back and revisit some of the theories that had been put forward for hunter-gatherers in these sites. So on page 6, I have some on page 7, sorry, some examples of these food remains, the burnt carbonized aggregates that I reported from both sites. So just in case you wanted to see what they look like under low power magnification without the fancy visuals of the scanning electron microscope, they essentially look like crumbs that you would see at the bottom of your toaster if you were to take them out and look at them with a magnifying glass. They are aggregated lumps that contain a lot of plant cells and tissue. Often you can see some bits of seeds that are sticking out, but not necessarily any greater detail. So what we did was, and this was something I was doing, I'm on page 8, and then which has more examples of these burnt remains. And on page 9 now. So what I started doing was, and this was part of my routine analysis, I started separating out these burnt aggregates, or charred lumps, if you want to call them something that you can relate to, or crumbs. I started separating them out for investigating later, while doing the more routine identification of seeds, tubers, and wood charcoal, which is a study on its own that will hopefully come out in the next year. But then I had some colleagues who had been doing work on similar remains from Neolithic sites in central Anatolia, which one of them is Çatalhöyük. The other person who was then at the time getting ready to publish her results was Amaya Aranz, who reported on the possible bread remains from Shubeika in Jordan that dates to about 14,000 years ago. And I remember thinking, well, I should probably look at what these guys have inside just to figure out if they are food or if they're something else. And I started seeing quite a lot of remains of pulses in many of the fragments that I've got. And at the time, I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, but all we could see were mashed up pieces of plants. I'm on page 10 now. And quite a lot of fragments of things that come from the seed coat layer of pulses, as well as some of the grasses. There's potentially some fragments of tubers in here as well that we couldn't quite identify because they're not in terribly great state. And hopefully there's a few other fragments that we can study in the future that will allow us to see what's in them. But I guess the way I tried to frame this article was to include both sites that I could find, that I found similar evidence in. And on page 11 you can see, and these are figures from the article. Sorry, there's nothing terribly fancy. We were starting to get a range of species that were in the wild vetch family, and quite a lot of them, for example, the Vicia arvilia, which is bitter wedge, as the name denotes, is quite bitter and often has to be processed for consumption. And we have evidence for its consumption all the way from the Epipaleolithic to the Neolithic to later periods, and even in classical Greece and later occupations. So, and we even have some textual evidence that they were consuming such things. A similar situation is with the Lathyrus, which is relatives of the grass pea. It's not always consumed very often, but the Greeks have a dish that they make called fava, which is not made with Vicia fava, quite confusingly, but it's made with one of the small Lathyrus species. And it similarly requires processing and leaching to be made edible so that you don't get a tummy ache. So we were then also finding in the Neanderthal occupation on page 12, you'll see the same figure from the article, mixtures of pulses that are not terribly happy to be preserved. To be perfectly honest, they're not very well preserved, and some grasses that probably come from a range of wild grasses, and they're in a just sort of lumpy, mashed, mixed situation. And we could see with quite a lot of these, if you zoom in to panel C, you'll see that there's areas where the starches have actually expanded and stuck together and started forming more gelatinized mixtures, which to us suggested that they were possibly soaked, potentially before mashing. And with fragments such as the one from Franchthi Cave that is on page 10, you can see that there are old breakages in the seed. So if you look at panel B of page 10, you'll see there's a seed fragment more or less in the center of the figure, the panel, that has an old break, which is a break that happened before it got carbonized, and it has these sort of smooth edges to it, which tends to suggest that it was wet or had potentially high moisture content before it got charred. all of which is sort of suggesting that they were soaked and then mashed and then carbonized, either accidentally as a result of just being thrown into a fire while things were being prepared, or they're just leftovers, or somebody just dropped a crumb as they were eating things. We also go into a bit of detail in the article about why we think these are not fecal remains. They tend, so when we get dung, herbivore or omnivore, they tend to be slightly more crumbly, if that makes sense, especially if they have been carbonized. Whereas I think you can see on the examples I included on 7 and 8 on pages that these are sort of more wholesome, so to speak, almost like food items that have been carbonized. And we don't necessarily have evidence of digestion. We don't get the spherulites that you tend to get preserved, especially if it is low temperature carbonization, which these tend to, these look like, because we wouldn't get seed coat preservation if they had been charred at higher temperatures. So we go through some of the literature, etc. So if you've got any questions on those, I'm happy to talk about it. But there's also links, I think, in the article and in some of the other stuff that address these issues in much greater detail. Okay, so I guess this is what I have to say about the findings. And on page 13, I start to sort of go into detail about how we contextualized all of this information, because I wanted to do something that was going beyond just saying, okay, well, we found pulses, and these are the species of the pulses that were eaten during the Mousterian, during the Baradostian, and then during the later Paleolithic in the Epigravetian in Franchthi Cave. So we started looking at evidence for plant use elsewhere. And we know that there is bits and pieces of an increasing amount of evidence on later Paleolithic or even earlier periods of plant use. One of these comes from a site that was reported in Mozambique that seems to have evidence for grinding and mashing of wild grass seeds. And this is evidence that is found on stone tools. And I'll go into why I specify where the evidence comes from in a little while. And then we had evidence from a site called Kebara Cave, which is in the Levant, that dates to about 60 to 70,000 years ago, and is again a Mousterian occupation, quite similar to the Mousterian levels at Shanidar Cave. And there they found carbonized seeds of legumes. Some of them are relatives of the wild lentils, wild grasses, quite a lot of wild pistachio seeds, which is called terebinth in many parts of the Near East, and a lot more things that they weren't quite sure if all of them were eaten or not. So that was on page 14, sorry. And then on page 15, I've got a site that is called Grotta Pagliacci. This is the cave site of Pagliacci from the south of Italy, where they found, again on stone tools, evidence for of starch grains that come from grasses, many of which are showing evidence of not just grinding, but also potentially soaking and cooking. And then on page 16, there's some examples of in situ hearths or little roasting areas that they probably was lined with clay and was likely used to roast wild grasses. And they didn't necessarily find more evidence of things like starch or seeds, but they could see quite a lot of phytoliths, which phytoliths are the cell impressions of grasses mostly, or grassy parts of plants that are preserved by the cell absorbing silica, and then as the plant rots away, you're left behind with the phytolith impression, which is essentially not going to degrade. It's pretty cool. And then, as I said earlier, one of my colleagues, Amaya Arans Otegu, what published her study on these similar food remains from the site of Shubeika 1 in Jordan, which dates to about 14,400, 500 years ago, and contains evidence of cooked items that have tubers, various grass seeds in them, quite a lot of other wild plant foods. Some of them could have been mustards. So there's growing evidence as we come towards the later periods, and then we did on page 18 a study that was from an epipaleolithic site in the northwest Zagros, and on page 19, you'll see our elaborate recovery system. Sorry. And then on page 20, the plant remains that we found included quite a lot of wild almond nutshell, very little evidence of wild pistachia, but it's possible that we will find some things in other sites. Tuber fragments, which mostly come from small wild plants, and wild, again, vetch and grass pea seeds, wild barley, and other wild grasses that were all deposited in this rock shelter that was potentially not occupied all the time, but it was inhabited by hunter-gatherers that come later than the occupation at Shanidar Cave, but still considerably earlier than the start of farming. On page 21, I tried to summarize some of the evidence that we have for quite a lot of these sites that are in the Near East and in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I have a lot of site names there on a table. This is so that if you want to look anything up, it should allow you to find the sites and the evidence that it points to. I have a row at the bottom that says which region it comes from, so Southern Levant, Northern Levant, Zagros, etc. The row above that has the chronological horizon as we know it at present, so Middle Paleolithic or Upper Paleolithic or Epipaleolithic and so on. And what we see in the region-wide use of plants is that there's a great reliance on wild almond and wild pistachio, which is the two plants that are at the top two rows. So amygdalus and pistachia are wild almond and wild pistachio, followed by wild legumes, so bitter vetches or grass pea, and wild lentils, and a range of other legumes that we know are relied on. In contrast, it doesn't look like there's as much use of grasses, which is highlighted in partially in the green. So these include hordeum, which is wild barley, avena, which is wild oat, and then other grasses. There's again very little reliance on things like wild oak acorns, which is quercus, and juniper berries, which is juniperus. So it looks like across this broad region that I showed you the map of, which includes the Fertile Crescent and all the way up to the Eastern Mediterranean, the Aegean, there is a very long-term tradition and deep reliance on these groups of plants that have very strong tastes. So that is wild almond, pistachio, and quite a lot of the wild legumes. So we started looking at our data with this light of seeing quite a lot of the Paleolithic plant staples that we're seeing have distinct tastes. They also require multiple steps and complex processing sequences, which is a fancy way of saying they all require culinary intervention or cuisines or cooking technologies to make them edible and prepare foodstuffs that are using them. Quite a lot of them, especially the oily nuts, wild almonds, and pistachios, may have been used in preparations that involved meat, fish, or other sorts of proteins, for flavoring various things or for processing other things to preserve them so that they last longer. And until this point, or I guess up to the early 2000s, quite a lot of the debate on later Paleolithic diet and hunter-gathering practices focused on calorie gain, that we were evaluating past hunter-gatherers in a way to characterize almost their diets through how much effort they had to put into what they had to gather and how much effort they had to put into to prepare them, seeing them in a way that was not necessarily acknowledging that there could have been culinary traditions, or there could have been methods and techniques of preparing foods um, with specific preferences for flavor. So my last slide is 22, and I'm almost here, I think. I just want to take this opportunity. I don't have an acknowledgement slide, sorry. I think the article and various other things I've written give the acknowledgements that would take pages and pages to list out in quite detail. So if you're curious, please click and read. But I want to take this opportunity, as it is a more broad science audience, to tell you why we do all of this stuff. And our main aim, I guess, and my main aim, is to understand resource use, the way we see how people choose the foods that they want to eat from supermarkets or things they want to collect out in the wild, in the landscape today. We want to understand how people actually use these resources and what kind of choices they made and what kind of impact those choices had on the environment. So in a way, we also want to understand changes in diet and the use of the environment, that and various other details on adaptation to different environments, with this sort of broad perspective in mind of what people ate, why they ate them, and what kind of impact it had on our own adaptation and evolution in the broad scheme of things, and what kind of impact it had on the nature that we actually inhabited, the socialized landscapes that humans and our ancestors have occupied for a very long time. Because the use of plants has an impact on the plants that tend to thrive around our settlements. The protection or management of various resources has an ecological impact on us and other animals that rely on these resources. So I guess beyond food and beyond other things, we want to understand the complexities of these choices and resource use practices in the past. I think that's all I've got to say. So if you've got any questions. Oh, sorry, I may have missed some.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. This is really so interesting, and also seeing the list of different types of um, plants and where they come from. This is really, I was really fascinated to realize when I read the article about your work, and then later the paper. Um, like, yeah, that you could figure out, like, if they use this, that has to have more elaborate steps, and gaining this insight, like this broader insight from those findings. That's really so yeah, so interesting and fascinating. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I want to give, I know Rose raised her hand a while ago, so I wanted to give her opportunity to ask first. Rose, please go ahead.
Oh, so I just wanted to ask how it correlates with the post-mortem remains that we sometimes find and what we look in the stomachs, etc. And what I'd really like to understand is how do they arrive at figuring out we can eat this, we can't eat this, and did some of them die along the way? And can we, when have they found their bodies? And like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So I don't. I mean, I guess the sites that I tend to study, we don't really get stomach contents. There's some later sites and sites that are in permafrost where you get such delicious and precious remains. but we do get evidence from starch or other plant remains or other things, like residues from meat, etc., that are trapped in the tartar on teeth from ancient skeletons. And they had actually studied some from Shanidar Cave. There's some really well-known ones from Neanderthal and early modern human sites in Spain, for example, where they found a variety of different plants. There was one site where Karen Hardy, who wrote the paper, argued that there was medicinal use of plants that was potentially for treating toothache or an abscess in the tooth. So I'm not entirely sure when they figured out what is okay to eat and what is not okay to eat. I think if I suspect it has very deep history, because there's very deep history of cooking with fire. What we tend to lack, especially if we need to rely on residues on stone tools, is we cannot see something close to the finished food product, which was the unique advantage of finding these carbonized lumps of, even if they're tiny, of prepared foods, because we can see combinations and some of the steps that are involved. But I suspect there was a lot of trial and error quite early on to figure out what is okay to eat and how to taste things. And I think today, because we don't really do this as a full-time job, because being a hunter-gatherer would have been the full-time occupation and tradition of quite a lot of those people, and even some of the hunter-gatherers that are around today are so much more knowledgeable than us in knowing and recognizing things to eat in the landscape, and to treat them in a way that makes them safe for consumption. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does. I just want to ask you a follow-on question. Um, so we know that children, especially like they start trying new things in environments, and it's like really difficult for parents to make sure they don't pick stuff off the floor, etc., to eat. Um, at some point, was did like those children from in those environments that they go out and try stuff and they would then puke it out, or they were more resilient, like it I know I'm asking you to hypothesize, but what do you think about that, like what do like the child skeletons say, if that makes sense?
I mean, so there's the problem is we don't have as many remains from the earlier sites as we do from the later sites. But I think there must have been trial and error. One thing we do see with the very late hunter gatherers and the earliest farmers is that there is greater investment, it seems, into preparing foods specifically for babies to wean them off mother's milk. I've got a colleague of mine, Jess Pearson, who's written about this on based on the isotopic evidence from some of the younger and juvenile and older adults from earliest farming societies. So I would suspect that they were. I mean, yeah, it's a bizarre thing. Is I suspect they would have tried various things, both children and adults. But there must have been um, some sort of knowledge of how to mitigate any nasty side effects, and yeah, but there must, I mean, we know that there's a development, as especially as I said, as people settle into more permanent occupations and take up farming, to provide specifically food for babies and children, which is but yeah, it's kind of cool.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
sorry, Rose, did I cut you off? I didn't want to.
Oh, I just said thank you so much.
Well, I hope that made sense. And
Oh,
thanks. It's yeah, great questions.
I have a follow-up question to that. When you said babies, I'm curious if that does mean babies or if it means includes toddlers, because even at this time, it's not common knowledge because people don't tend to do this in our culture in public, but the worldwide age of weaning is 7 years old, which will really shock people unless this is what your
Yeah,
research
no, I
is.
mean, I totally mean like toddlers.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, I'm just, just was
I tend to
interested.
classify them as all babies. I don't know. Sorry.
It's true. I always feel like, my kids were babies until they were 7, and then they're just bigger babies.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's
Yeah.
important, and I was also wondering if you meant that those I don't know if you called it foods or something that that the women were eating. Was this to dry up a milk supply, or was this to dissuade or flavor the milk, or was this for nutrition for
I
the
think
children?
I think so there's some evidence that there's potentially some things being prepared for the children separately as well. So my colleague Jessica Pearson has written about this based on the chemical signatures on the bones, and the shift she sees between toddlers, juveniles versus adult diet signatures. Um, so I'm not entirely sure if there would have been it's a very interesting insight as to whether it would be to prevent and give a sort of unpleasant flavor to breast milk. But I think there's definitely an attempt to replace it nutritionally as well, so that it doesn't breast milk is not the only source,
Yeah,
if that
I
makes
will look
sense.
that up, because I think, again, in the culture, so I'll speak of in the U.S., that I'm going to imagine that it's for nutrition, because people don't recognize, unless you're in a breastfeeding culture, all the benefits of breastfeeding.
Hmm.
So that's fascinating, and I can't wait
I
to
think it
read it.
is. Yeah, I think it is nutrition. So, but it's interesting that it develops as things are sort of. It's almost like something we don't necessarily think about life in the past, that you know um, some of these practices and nutritional practices and healthcare kind of insight would have been that deep in the past. I mean, this is probably 9 to 10,000 years ago. So, yeah.
Right, because you aren't having to worry so much about dehydration and
Hmm.
nutrition and carrying something in your 2 arms, besides a child, just for a few. So it would seem that way. And also, you had mentioned, I want to thank you for your I don't remember exactly how you mentioned it, but you were discussing the food choices, as getting away from the idea that the early people were, or that the research or the people's food choices were based on caloric intake, and you seem like your view is viewing those people as having feelings and thoughts and emotions that may have driven their food choices, and so you're seeing them for their whole humanity, and I think that this kind of awareness will really open up so much more information to us. And when you were discussing about traditions, that, well, you said that something made it easier on the tummy. This is something I'm curious if you can speak on that at all more. For example, I have wondered, how do those traditions evolve, that wisdom, and where does it go? I learned of this from, I have a friend who grew up in southern India, and when he was teaching me how to cook some foods, he said, this, you cook the beans, and then we add cumin seeds, for example, because that helps with digestion. Now, I didn't grow up cooking that way. I grew up, this tastes good, or these flavors go well together, but there's a lot of wisdom like that. And so did you see, is that something that you saw evidence of, those kind of preferences?
I mean, so it's, I guess, there's a lot of stuff to unpack. I think personally, there's traditions that we can see for the use of certain plants that I think must relate to a cultural tradition. So I guess within archaeology, we're very happy to classify the way you make a pot or the way you make a stone tool as being part of learned culture, and I guess because of the way I grew up, I tend to look at foods and plants that are used for food or other things as part of that similar kind of cultural arsenal, that it is something that you get to learn, you get to do certain ways, and then you might innovate, you might change things, you might try different things, but there's that knowledge as a baseline to carry you to choose plants, to cook them, to prepare them, and to feed them to yourself and to your family. And I suspect because, as your friend also says, my mother always cooks eggs with cumin for precisely the same reason, because it's supposed to help digestion. I'm not entirely sure if that is real or not, but I do exactly the same way because it's a flavor I grew used to and I like it. So I think there's elements of finding comfort in flavors that are familiar to us, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with seeking them and to perpetuating them. But we also know, for example, from I guess nutritional science and investigations of plant chemicals, that quite a lot of the plants that we rely on could have, I guess, beneficial side effects. I've always read with great interest work being done on studies of the microbiome, because I think the way we evaluate past diets or even today, by looking simply at the number or amount of calories, is a slightly misplaced. That we need to start looking at how diverse certain things were, what kind of diverse fibers were coming into the diet, and that sort of thing. So I suspect there was a bit of both, that there were flavors that they liked, and there were things that were beneficial to them in digestion, in nutrition, and to, I mean, if you want to imagine a period of human existence where there were no other kinds of medicines or any other way of curing yourself, and most of these things would have been plant-based. If you had a pain or you had discomfort, you would turn to plants, and animals do this. So I don't see why early humans wouldn't. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I rambled a bit.
Not at all. You could go on, and I'm sure we would all. I'm eating. I'm so
It's
sorry.
okay.
We would all be so happy, and also that's something to think about too. Now we are separated from other animals, and then in the period that you're talking about, I would think that the early humans saw themselves as part of the whole picture. And so if you see a dog eating some grass, and then the dog throws up, and then maybe the
Hmm.
human would get that idea from that dog and not feel like that's your realm of existence and over here is mine, and I take, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is separation from the animal world or the animated world is potentially recent. There's been a lot of anthropological theorizing and debate on this, which it's an interesting area of research. I've often thought about it, but I don't dare to go into it that much. So, and I suspect, I mean, I know for a fact that even farmers today have much greater understanding and observation of nature, simply because they have to pay attention to it, than many of us who are urban dwellers who don't necessarily have to go hang out with sheep or cows.
Thank you. I want to pass the mic on, but before I do, now what you said about cumin, that's what we put in beans. That's what
Yeah.
my family does, and so I never even correlated the two. So thank you. I will.
Yeah, no, we
Well,
do it with eggs. My mum is insistent that it helps with eggs. I don't know.
yeah, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. And now I can remember I had a housemate from Turkey, and he put cumin on what is it, ayran? that drink.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he put it
I
in
hadn't
the.
seen that one before. Yeah.
It's yogurt and salt and
Yeah. Yeah.
water, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. So thank you. I'll come back to you. Welcome Denise and welcome Laura and Katarina. I'm passing the mic to the next
Yep.
lucky person.
Yeah, please unmute and go ahead. Thank you.
Selam oldum.
I just lost you there for a second.
Selam Ceren, ben Deniz.
Merhaba. Merhaba.
This was a really interesting talk. I'm sorry I missed it, but I was reading through the paper.
Okay.
And it's just very along the Silk Road, and also within contemporary cuisine. I feel like it's Victoria was mentioning in some Latin cultures, and so I was curious. I wanted to ask, is cumin, would you say, in modern cuisine?
I lost your question there. Sorry.
How would you say around the
You're
world at this
breaking up
point,
in
or maybe
between.
not so much?
Sorry, I couldn't hear any of the question.
Denise, I don't know if you can
Okay,
fix.
I'm sorry.
You're breaking up a little.
Yeah, my cell service
This is great.
Oh,
Now it's great. It's great. It's
sorry.
great. Talk through it. It's good now.
has been really
Yeah,
terrible.
talk now.
I'm just gonna pass the mic.
No, please. Please, we want to hear
Please
it.
try. I want to hear your question.
Say it or put it in the chat maybe, but try
Okay,
again.
yeah, I'll
It's
put it
sounding
in the
really.
chat.
But go. We can hear you perfectly now.
Yeah, it works for 20 seconds at a time, and then 10 seconds I go away.
Sorry.
So
Go.
speaking of corn, for example, it's a descendant of grasses. There's the coevolution, the selection. So it's very curious. Is cumin a grass type, or?
No, cumin is in the umbellifers. So these are the relatives of things like fennel, carrots, parsley, etc. And I don't know exactly when they start. I know that it is in the later archaeological periods that people start to cultivate it and carry it on as a spice. So it's got a deep history. It's just it goes beyond my period of study. So I'm so sorry. I don't know precisely when. I suspect it's because I know the Romans were quite into quite a lot of spices. They went everywhere with their preferred spices. So I can look it up if you want to, if you're curious about cumin specifically. And
I mean,
send me an email.
it was just an interesting question. It's okay if you don't have the answer right.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, yeah. I don't know that much about the origin and domestication of cumin, but I know if it's used for a very long time, couple thousand years at least. So.
Isn't it interesting how liking certain foods can be because of the benefits that you can get from it? So cumin, for example, food cravings in pregnant females, and it can actually indicate deficiencies in nutrient levels and things of that nature. So isn't it interesting then?
Yeah, I mean I know this is one of the things I've always read about and just thought certain flavors of plants must be important, not necessarily just because it is it's just cuisine, but it might also signal something about our adaptation to different environments. But there's probably a lot of links that have to be made before we can build an argument around it. But yeah, as you point out, there's food cravings and specific flavors must be important on some level.
At least in some cases, in the pregnancy situation, it can indicate deficiencies. I mean, I'm sure that I can't be the only person in here who really likes chocolate. And that's because it contains certain types of alkaloids that can enhance mood. So
yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I mean, this was one of the reasons why I wanted. So I had done a grant application where I wanted to investigate various phytochemical properties of plant foods that we find in Paleolithic sites to try and understand if there are specific profiles of plants that are preferred in special regions or time periods, and whether we could track, as you say, things that people seek, whether it is to meet deficiencies or to help with the digestion of all sorts of other stuff. Um, because there's, yeah, if you're eating a predominantly meat heavy diet, but if most of this is coming from animals that don't have that much fat, then you need something to help you to digest all of this protein, which is where all the fibers and various other plant chemicals come in. So yeah, no, it's certainly an interesting area. Just yeah. Mm.
I really appreciated all of the microscopy and just, you know, all of the visuals. This was a very nice part of it. I was curious about the total number of foods that you included in this study. Like, you know, there's like nuts and nutshells, and I saw some stuff about
Mhm.
earlier lentils and
Mhm.
pistachio and things of that. How many total species of food are we talking about?
So in the one that got published in with the carbonized crusts, or are we talking about other stuff?
I am referring to the presentation that that's pinned to the top, but you can speak to the more specific one if that's easier.
No, it's, let me see. So how many? I'm not sure, because I think the one that I made a giant table of, this is for multiple sites. So this is the one that was on page 21 with
Hmm.
all these other sites. Um, this is probably, so it's not all of them are sites that I've studied. um, and it probably represents several tens of thousands of plant remains.
Yeah, I see oaks in here and junipers and
Yeah.
other sorts of.
Yeah,
Wow.
so there's I mean, these are the big types that are dominant that we find in these sites. But for example, Ohala 2 had by itself, I think, over 20,000 carbonized plant remains, and plenty more where it came from.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so there's a lot of, yeah. If you, I mean, if you're into it, I'd certainly suggest searching them out and reading out the papers. I included links to quite a lot of the sites, just in case people wanted to see the original publications. But yes, there's a lot of data that it's just, yeah, and sites like Abu Huraira and Ohala 2, for example, are really very diverse. um, they've got several hundred different plant species identified in them. So, and I'm still working on at least the Baradostian levels from Shanidar Cave to finalize all the data. So it's yeah,
Wow.
takes time. Sorry.
Of course it does.
It's just a bit because you don't know what exactly. I guess I have some examples like on page 20 of what some of this stuff looks like. Um, and I guess you can say some of them look like things that are recognizable um, to people, but then you get a lot of broken bits and pieces, things that are fragmentary and things that require to be SEM'd individually to figure out what they are. So yeah,
Sounds like a big puzzle.
it is. Yeah, it's kind of you don't know what you're going to get, and then you don't know if it's going to be worth the effort to study them. But it keeps us busy, you know. It's fun.
Got
It's
there.
fun.
Thank you so much, Jeden. I want to pass
Yeah,
the
no
mic
worries.
to
I'm
Gordon.
glad you got to ask the question. I'm glad we figured out your
I'm glad finally it
internet
cooperated a
issue.
little bit to passing the mic.
All right.
Hey Lara, did
Lara?
you?
There you go. Sorry, Katarina. I was going to invite you or Lara.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, thank you, Saran, for your presentation. I actually was in and out of a hearing, so I missed a lot, but I was looking at the slides, and it's very interesting. I just have a basic question that you probably maybe covered. How different, do we know how different the physiology of the human digestive system was, like back at that point, like 60,000 years ago or more? And could that be like, did they have less sense of taste or smell? Is that why they were gravitating towards stronger, stronger flavors, etc.? Thanks.
Well, it's something I don't know about. So, I mean, we know that there's differences in the digestive systems, and there's been some studies that was done on hunter-gatherer microbiomes from the Paleolithic that seems to suggest that they had quite diverse um, microbiomes that were specifically built on the wild plants. It was actually quite recently published, so and I think it was Nature. I'm not sure, but I'm not entirely sure if we know that much about the taste. But we know, for example, the mutation for the bitter taste detection is very early. It is, oh gosh, I can't remember, but couple 100,000 years ago. So they were able to taste quite a lot of the bitter flavor and some of the other things that are associated with similar mutations. Um, so I hope that answers the.
Thank you.
Did you say that the ability to taste that bitterness did not show up until that time that you mentioned?
Oh yeah, no, I think so. There's a mutation that is associated with bitter taste, um, that was identified to have developed by, let me see, it is the TAS2R gene family. And it is quite early. They say probably 200 million years ago that it was developed. So
I see. So it was early because I know
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
No,
Mm.
I sorry.
It can indicate toxic plants. So I would think that would have been really sad. So I heard you completely backward.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. I
So
might
that's
have
what,
been rambling
yeah.
at the same time. So
Not at all.
oh,
No, not at all. No, so that's really interesting. So that was, and that kept us safe. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
thinking like cucumbers, like when we taste such a bitter cucumber, and there
Oh, I
are
know. Yeah.
toxic cucumbers, the big round pointy kind.
I
Um,
know. Yeah. It's
yeah.
bad when I get one of those bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
I get
So
so
interesting.
sad.
Yeah, and you had mentioned caring about about the information that you're finding now, plants and how they were used, how that might help us to consider the same now. And I think about, you made me think of quinoa and how that became so popular because it's high protein, it's delicious and super fast to cook, but that when people outside of the regions of where, Andean mountains and South America and that, now I had heard that it's really hard for indigenous people to keep up with their own supply because world demand, and now people are trying to farm it who aren't relying on that.
Yeah, I mean it's I think similar problems with intensive farming of all sorts, um, especially with things that are water hungry, like almonds and soya. That um, it's a very complicated equation as to how to go about, I guess, thinking about the future. I would like us to be able to offer perspective and insight into how we're going to actually survive in the next couple hundred years at least, and whether we can learn lessons from the past. But to be perfectly honest, there are so many dynamics and so many issues to be mindful of, and one of the things you point out is yeah, the indigenous farmers not necessarily being able to meet their own needs because of all this global demand. It's complicated.
Pressures of capitalism. Go ahead, Rose.
I was just gonna ask, have you found any new plant strains or strains that are no longer extant? Um, and could we clone them as well as genetically engineer them into current plants? Like, are there, like, have you heard about golden rice?
So yeah, okay. I guess most of what I study, especially even the ones that come from early farming sites, they, even if they're not carbonized, there's so much DNA degradation that we can only get small fragments of DNA, and then it has to be amplified. So it's quite hard. It would be almost impossible, I think, to reverse engineer something out of it. We can sometimes see things that are not as commonly used anymore. So there was a gloom wheat that we knew was quite heavily relied on in the Neolithic across the Near East and parts of Europe and elsewhere, and even in North Africa, that we were able to say is the closest relative to one of the lesser commonly cultivated ones today. But yeah, I don't think that we'd be able to rejuvenate anything per se, unless it came from a very special kind of deposit. But even then, it's hard to argue if something is more beneficial, because plants can be fairly invasive in some cases. Their introduction has to be done very carefully from an ecological perspective.
Yeah. Are there any like anoxic sites or places where we could go and like try to find these seeds, etc.? Like I'm just thinking about the shipwreck that they found, which was Shackleton's ship, and it was perfectly preserved because it has because of how cold it is, as well as the specific environment, as well as the
Yeah.
thermocline and everything else. It is almost exactly the same as the day it sank. So could we find it buried in like places where the ocean has subsumed it, or
I'm
something
not
else?
sure. I mean, there's some sites where they get preservation of especially the later historic and later prehistoric materials in like under permafrost, and sometimes you get them in waterlogged environments, which is essentially something that is preserved in a bog or a marsh or under seawater, under lake water. Um, but even then, you might not always have viable seeds to grow. It's a very narrow chance, I'd say.
Oh, thank you.
Jake, do you have time for one more question? I know we've
Sure,
been
no
going over
problem.
an hour. Thank you. Hey, Jake, please go
Thanks.
ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious if you found anything that might be considered medicinal in your studies.
I mean, I suppose there are some things that we suspect were medicinal. So not at this site, but in other sites that I've worked on, we find relatives of wormwood, so Artemisia, that we know today various species of that genus are used in predominantly medicinal or digestive capacities. There's a few other things, but it's hard to be entirely certain. As I said, there was one study done on um, DNA extraction from tartar that is preserved in the teeth of Neanderthals, which is just kind of mind blowing that they actually did this. Where they had found, I think, evidence for willow bark, which they had said was potentially used as a painkiller or an anti-inflammatory. A few other things that have been argued for. Um, it's possible. I mean, it depends on the preservation. I personally haven't had something that had direct evidence of it.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does anyone have another question? A quick one before we close the room?
I just wanted to add to what your answer to Jake, Jaren, that
Mhm.
that could also be similar to the blurred line between animate life, that
Yeah,
the lack of
absolutely.
blurred line. I mean, it could be the
Yeah.
question of medicinal. What would that mean? So it could, we're talking about something that's used for digestion.
Hmm.
Even this willow bark, that could have been something that was taken on maybe a regular basis because it sustained comfortable living. So maybe I'm sure that there were things that are, this is specific to that, but maybe it wasn't
Yeah.
quite as distinct then as it is now because of the more organic means of living that people were living as they had evolved then, I'm going to conjecture. So it wasn't quite as distinct. This is meant for,
Yeah,
eat
yeah.
this for medicinal, like eat this because it promotes good
Hmm.
health. Eat this because this is how we survive. So it might be
Yeah.
different then.
No, I think yeah. So there's a lot of side roads to go into and how to precisely characterize it. But I don't. Yeah, I agree. What is consumed part of nutrition and what is consumed as a medicinal doesn't necessarily have to be separate things. They could have been done at the same time for similar reasons, with similar stories told about them. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's always so interesting. Like, when you're not um, doing this type of work, that from these findings of seeds, you can kind of learn so much, also about the lifestyle and other information from that data set. I find that so interesting and so fascinating. We had like a metallurgy room where they
Hmm.
found that metals in ancient China was way more complex also than
Hmm.
previously thought. And this then gave like insights to like how the structure was of
Hmm.
society. I think
Yeah,
that's
no, I mean, yeah,
fascinating.
they're all kind of, I mean, some things are interconnected for sure. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Yeah, no, thanks you guys. You're making me think. I appreciate this.
And yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it. And we for sure do. And yeah, feel free to always come back.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
no, I'm gonna keep it on now and see if I can make it to some of the talks or at least listen to the uploads when I can. Yeah,
well, thank you. And
cool.
maybe,
And the timing is not bad. Yeah.
yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying maybe when you have some findings from your work in
Yeah.
Portugal, we'll chat again. We'll
Yeah.
invite you again.
I mean, I'm gonna work on similar sites. It's just that I will be based in Portugal. So I don't know if I'll start working on Paleolithic in the Iberian Peninsula. That could be exciting. We'll see. It takes time.
Oh
It's
yeah,
kind of
sure.
slow.
Well, it's human studies. It's always more complicated but
Thanks.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Oh,
And
thank you. Thanks, you guys. This has
maybe
been
we'll
fun.
come and visit you one day.
Yeah, you should.
That would be fun. Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending the Saturday with us and
Yeah.
Thank you.
enjoy.
It was
Have a
amazing.
Oh yeah, hi
It's
Hey,
been
Kyle.
fun.
Kyle.
Hi. Did you have a question or no?
So mine's a little off topic, but
That's okay.
it's kind of that people will always argue whether or not meat was part of an ancient diet, I guess, and
Mm-hmm.
so I guess I was going to ask about that if you found any like bones, anything that would show that these people were also eating meat by any chance.
So we, it's not. actually, it's not off topic at all. So there's plenty of evidence that people consumed meat either from small mammals or larger animals, not necessarily limited to the site. So they would have been proper omnivores, if that makes sense. Not necessarily eating meat all the time, but there's other things. There's some sites where we know that they were going after things like bone marrow, which has a lot of fat, um, blood, or other things that are being harvested, and just like we do today, I guess, in various societies. The debate often, especially when it comes to the later Paleolithic, centers on whether these hunter gatherers were eating mostly meat, so like carnivores, or they had greater amounts of plants contributing to their diets, and even some of the earlier hunter gatherers, what kind of impact and importance did plants have in their diets. So you'll read some of the literature that is based on chemical signatures from human skeletal remains that seems to indicate that some hunter gatherers, especially some Neanderthals, had pretty high contributions from animal meat to their diet, whereas some of the others were eating a lot more plants, or had greater diversity, so some meat, some plants. In essence, it varies quite a lot. Just like it varies today, there's great diversity in prehistoric diets as well. And trying to say that they would have had more meat or more plants is a bit challenging, partly because of the kind of evidence that we get. It's hard to actually say this was the Paleolithic diet or this was the Neanderthal diet. I guess you need to kind of ask which area and which time period and which specific individuals, because there's some sites where they've done isotopes on one individual who looks like they're eating a lot of meat, and all the other individuals that are found in the same location look like they're eating a lot more plants. So there's, yeah, complications galore in that.
Yeah, that's
Maybe they had the same
thank
debate
you
going
so
on
much.
then than now.
Hello?
Sorry, Kai. I just want to say maybe they had the same debate going on then as now.
I don't know. I mean, yeah,
Well,
probably.
I would hanker that the person that they thought was eating meat was bigger, stronger, and more powerful than the rest. And
Maybe, yeah,
right,
maybe,
that's why they
or
would have
had to,
assumed that way.
yeah,
Yeah,
What a,
yeah.
or maybe they had
And
to run up and down a hill quite a lot. I don't know. I mean, who knows?
that larger example, though, if we consider the gorilla,
Hmm.
who's
yeah, but
not
the gorilla's
exactly a
not
meat
human,
eater.
but it's not human.
No, no, but they are pretty large. And
We're
anyway,
primates, Kyle.
yeah,
We're all
But
yeah,
primates. We're just
see,
exactly.
Rose, that's actually an ad hominem. It's not the same. If you were to look at humans and primates, you just that would just be doing a scientific displeasure, pretty much, or
I'm gonna do
unfavor.
it.
You can't just
Okay, well, thank
just
you.
it's
Thank you, Kyle.
but
Sorry. Thank you.
yeah,
Sorry.
and I like that you brought up the location because in the anthropology textbook that I remember reading, it was location that was pretty predominant about the diets and whether or not people were
Hmm.
taking part in cannibalism. Actually,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about cannibalism. It's kind of it's hard to evaluate that evidence always. But for sure, location mattered because I mean, if anything, I think most humans have been very successful at adapting to all these kinds of challenging environments, and have developed dietary and culinary practices to actually allow us to survive. And in the case of more meat consumption versus less, I mean, we don't always see direct evidence of that contributing to body size difference, or it's hard to evaluate musculature anyway. It may have been something else that contributed to that signal, because we don't always get a diary from these prehistoric remains that says this is how much meat I ate. We see the signature that is left behind from absorption of the nutrients. So there may have been complications to do with bioavailability of nutrients in that one individual. There might have been digestive differences between different groups. There's all sorts of, I guess, the equation is not quite straightforward, sadly, for us to be able to interpret, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. One of the other things that came to my mind actually was they found evidence that the people that were building the pyramids were actually fed meat, and that might have been for a reason because of all of the and basically yeah. So it's something because they wonder whether or not these were actually like a full-on slave class of people, or if they were treated a little bit better because they were working so hard. And then if they were working so hard, was that why they were fed meat? Just something I thought I'd bring up just in case you haven't heard of before, but thank you so very
Oh
much.
yeah,
It was an
no,
amazing
my
presentation.
pleasure. I mean, I didn't know about the ancient Egypt example. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Anything that goes past the Neolithic, I tend to just kind of say, okay, this is very late for me. Um, so yeah. Anyway, it's been fun. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate the discussion, the questions, and how informal you've allowed me to be.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
the
been great
pleasure was.
fun. It's been fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much. And yeah, as I said, good luck for the move. I hope
Oh,
everything
thank
goes
you.
well. And then yeah, hope I hear you back one day, or maybe
Yeah.
even see you. That will
I'm
be
sure
so
we'll
much
keep in
fun.
touch. All
Yeah,
right.
let's keep in touch. Enjoy
Yeah.
the rest of your weekend. Happy holidays.
Oh,
Happy New
cheers. Thanks
Year.
to you guys. You too.
And yeah, everyone, thank you for coming, asking questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. And I see you're sending me hearts. You're too cool. Thank you.
And yeah, and we have one more room before the end of the year, and it's on Monday. That's our
Uh-huh.
last room this year for everyone. If you want to check it out, it's about a 3D camera, but that is lensless, that Dr. Young at UC Davis developed. And then we'll have more talks again starting January 5th. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ceren. This was such a pleasure talking to you. And bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much. Thank you, friends, for being here. Bye-bye.
all right, thank you. Close the room in 3, 2, 1. Bye, everyone. Thank you.